North Korea's supreme commander moves his warplanes, bolsters his defenses along his east coast. Tonight, U.S. defense officials tell CNN MiG fighter jets, some equipped with missiles, have been spotted by satellites. It's seen as a response to American bombers and fighter jets who've just flown off North Korea's east coast. Patrolling further north of the DMZ than at any time this century, North Korea has threatened to shoot those planes out of the sky. And Pyongyang releases a propaganda video showing what that kind of encounter might look like, followed by a U.S. aircraft carrier in flames.
President Trump's statements and the follow-up was a propaganda boon for them.
Today, the president again warned of the consequences of a U.S. military option if Kim Jong-un strikes first, or if there's intelligence that he's about to.
If we take that option, it will be devastating, I can tell you that, devastating for North Korea. He's acting very badly. He's saying things that should never, ever be said, and we're replying to those things.
But tonight there are new warnings about the president's own comments, his increasingly personal insults of Kim Jong-un recently.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
Little Rocket Man, we can't have madmen out there shooting rockets all over the place.
Those remarks prompted Kim to issue a rare personal statement with his own name on it, calling President Trump mentally deranged, a dotard. Experts warn to avoid losing face, Kim might feel he has to take this showdown beyond just words. A prominent defector in Seoul spoke to CNN.
Kim Jong-un is a godlike figure, and if the godlike figure says such things to the U.S., it is not going to stay as words. It needs to be put into action. That's what makes this situation serious.
Experts say Kim's been willing to kill to warn his rivals not to cross him. A former South Korean intelligence researcher told GQ magazine the murder of Kim's half-brother at Kuala Lumpur's airport this year was part of a master plan. He says Kim, quote, wanted to send a worldwide message by murdering Kim Jong-nam in this gruesome public way. Kim's regime denies ordering the hit. But tonight there's concern that President Trump might be painting Kim into a dangerous corner.
My concern is that cumulatively, this will all lead to some sort of horrible miscalculation where Kim doesn't take something seriously and he reacts, or he thinks there's going to be a U.S. or he thinks that there will be a U.S. attack, and he has a use or lose situation where he lobs the first nuclear weapon.
This is no news to most South Koreans who have long become immune to North Korea threats. But many experts around the world are now voicing their opinions on how North Korea is unlikely to start a war it cannot win. This as many fear the chances of a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and the Hermit Kingdom are at their highest point in recent years. Yoo Jun-hee tells us more.
CBS News, citing various pundits on Wednesday, says the survival of the regime in Pyongyang is its leader Kim Jong-un's top priority, despite behavior that could otherwise be seen as reckless and irrational. They also say that although Pyongyang may or may soon have the capability to devastate an American city with a nuclear-tipped ICBM, it's seen as having no ability to destroy the U.S. outright. However, amid the escalating war of words and brewing mistrust between Washington and Pyongyang, experts say even the slightest of miscalculations could easily trigger a full-scale war on the Korean peninsula.
My concern is that cumulatively, this will all lead to some sort of horrible miscalculation where Kim doesn't take something seriously and he reacts.
There are some observers who also fear that the world is closer to nuclear war than it has been at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Although it's hard to predict the exact shape and form of a potential military conflict on the Korean peninsula, the death toll is easily expected to be in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Those fears continue to persist, with a harsh verbal tit-for-tat between the U.S. and North Korea showing no signs of cooling down at the moment.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and pilot for the Air National Guard. Good to see you this morning.
Hey, thanks. Good to be with you.
Okay, so what do you make of these new deployments in both South Korea and the Pentagon here are confirming will be deployed to the peninsula? Is it a show of force? Is it a warning? I mean, are those assets in place to actually do something if necessary?
I think it's all of the above. I think the assets are in place to do something because whenever, if in fact, and God forbid, but if in fact military needs to be used, we need it on our terms. We need as many assets in place to have as many simultaneous opening strikes as possible to reduce the amount of return fire that can be done. The other thing, though, is I think it sends a very strong show of force, not just to the North Koreans, but to the Chinese. The Chinese have as much of an interest of a not strong American presence in that region as the North Koreans do. So the more military we deploy to say, look, we're serious about this, it is empowering the diplomatic and economic instruments of power to hopefully compel the regime to denuclearize, because we cannot accept the Kim regime with nuclear weapons that can be delivered here when they've said they have every intention of doing it.
A couple more interesting polls about how the president is dealing with North Korea on this issue of whether the tough talk the president has used, you know, fire and fury and all these kinds of things, total destruction, whether it's working or not. 70% say they don't think it's helpful. 23% say they do think it's helpful. And when it comes to how we should deal with this moving forward, should we focus on diplomacy and sanctions? 61% say that's the key. 27% say threatening military action is actually the key. So what do you make of the administration's strategy for dealing with this regime thus far?
I actually think the administration's done a good job. And the poll that says 61% say diplomacy, 23% say military, I actually say it's 100%, and it's 100% that those work together. You can't do diplomacy successfully against an adversary without having a successful potential of a military option. Now, nobody wants to see this, but that is what compels Kim Jong-un to the table. He knows if we use military force, he will die. And so now that's what will hopefully compel him to change his behavior. I think the American people in generally don't ever want to go to war. I think that's completely understandable. But it is pretty interesting that they've said that they're willing to give this president, I think, leverage to do what he needs to do. And I think, frankly, the tough talk, some people are uncomfortable with it. We've had 25 years with this regime of diplomatic talk. I think it's time to try something different, being tough. Otherwise, God forbid, we're going to be forced to go to the military option.
Well, of course, you mentioned China, a key player in this whole thing. Secretary Tillerson headed there, the president later this year. How do you think those conversations must go? Because obviously, the key is making China believe that stopping North Korea is in its best interest.
Well, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in those conversations. China right now sees North Korea as a strategic buffer to American influence. They look at American presence in Japan after World War II and in South Korea, and they see that threatening. Okay, fine, I understand that. But they, to this point, have said having that crazy regime on their border is more in their interest than a potentially unified Korean peninsula. The United States, I think, needs to make it clear, and is, we're not focused on unification, but we are focused on a denuclearization of North Korea. And by the way, China, we know that 80-some% of all commerce between North Korea into North Korea goes through your border. And we know you can shut it down if you really want to. So I think that kind of pressure and leverage, as well as bringing it to the public, even being on TV and talking about what the Chinese are doing to enable North Korea, puts more pressure on them.
All right, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, great to see you. Thank you, sir.